evening, Papua New Guinea, and welcome to a brand new episode of Business PNG. Tonight on the show, we're here in Brisbane for the 2018 PNG Investment Conference, where Publishing Director for the Business Advantage International, Andrew Wilkins, sits down with Prime Minister Peter O'Neill to discuss upcoming APAC meetings as well as the investment opportunities they bring. The 2018 PNG Investment Conference was held in Brisbane, Australia last week. The annual conference promoted business and investment opportunities in Papua New Guinea to the international business community and once again gave the country an opportunity to present its investment credentials to an audience of domestic and international investors. Prime Minister Peter O'Neill and Australia's Assistant Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Mark Coulton, led the lineup of over 30 experts and business leaders discussing PNG's investment potential. Prime Minister Peter O'Neill boldly announced that the country's economy is seeing a turnaround. He stated that though naturally the country went through a period of setbacks after the droughts and the recent earthquakes, but according to Mr. O'Neill and his government, they're positive that the economy is getting back on track after seeing steady improvements.
I'm very confident that Papua New Guinea over the next 6 months is going to expect quite a large interest and a large spur in economic activity in our country. It has not been easy, and if I said it was easy, I'll be not informing the public what's the actual facts. The facts are that before us, and our country has been resilient. We have survived what has been a terrible challenge. Not many countries in the world experience this and survive. They've got economic crisis. They go into recession, but we did not. We continue to maintain some level of growth. So I think all in all, we've done well.
ADB country economist Edward Faber provided some insight on the state of the country's economy, as well as what will drive further growth in the future.
So we can say that, yes, PNG has shown resilience. We've come through some of the most difficult times, which were in 2015, and that we are seeing some improvement due to better commodity prices in particular. Better commodity prices are helping to lift growth, improve the foreign exchange position, and also the revenue position of the government. Although risks also remain with commodity prices, as we know with the China-USA trade dispute.
Papua New Guinea looks to be on the cusp of a new phase of significant growth. This is according to Prime Minister Peter O'Neill, who invited investors to invest in Papua New Guinea. The projected growth is driven in part by major resources and infrastructure investment.
The agreements with the petroleum and the mining companies for Wafi-Golpu and Papua LNG, again, that will generate jobs for thousands of people, create business opportunities for small to medium enterprises. And over the next 6 months, all these activities, our opportunity to showcase ourselves when the business leaders come for APAC in November. There will be thousands of bankers who are coming from many parts of the world who have never been to PNG. They don't see what a wonderful country that we have, and the opportunities for investment not only in mining and petroleum, but agriculture, tourism, small to medium enterprises, manufacturing, key infrastructure building, construction. These are things that we want to create to generate interest, and that is the long-term benefits that Papua New Guineans will enjoy in many years to come. So.
Prime Minister O'Neill stated that his government continues to remove red tapes, making it easier to do business in Papua New Guinea, and in turn cementing Papua New Guinea as a destination where big businesses can operate. In an exclusive interview with MTV, Prime Minister Peter O'Neill stated that for many years, the country has been told that we would have Dutch disease and that the economy will suffer as a result of that. This perception, he added, has led governments over the years to allow companies to park export revenues in foreign accounts. To remedy this, Mr. O'Neill said that his government is renegotiating new deals in order to add some rebalancing in some of the projects that are being put up.
What we need to do is basically make sure there's a right balancing of our current account and of course inflow of export revenues that are coming into the country. For many years we've been told that there will be Dutch disease, and as a result the economy will suffer as a result of that. And this perception has led us to allowing companies to park export revenues in foreign accounts. For the last 43 years, governments have been allowing that to do. So right now we are renegotiating that. There maybe need some rebalancing in some of the new projects that we are going to put out. Because the last thing we want to do is experience what we have experienced, where when there's shortage of foreign currency, less imports come in, key infrastructures that we need to rebuild based on the imported materials we get come to a standstill, people lose jobs, so the cycle continues, and that's what we want to avoid.
Prime Minister O'Neill also welcomed the increasing interest in funding infrastructure in the Pacific that has been shown by China and a trilateral arrangement between Australia, the United States and Japan. There's no getting around it. Climate change is very real, and our Pacific Island nations know just how real it is. The 2016 Paris Agreement, to which Papua New Guinea is a signatory, has committed governments across the globe to a low-carbon future. According to renowned climate expert Tim Flannery, the world has waited too long to come to an agreement, and the 2020s will be worse than the recent teens in terms of climate change because the gas is already in the atmosphere. By the 2030s, there won't be any Arctic ice, according to Tim Flannery.
Sadly, we have come very late to an agreement on climate change. It took until Paris, 21 years of negotiation, to get a global agreement. And we're now in a situation where we have emitted so much greenhouse gas that we are almost certainly going to cross the 2-degree threshold that we are trying to avoid, unless we can draw down immense volumes of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So this is a separate matter from the deployment of clean energy technology like wind and solar. That's going ahead very strongly now, and the use of natural gas to displace more carbon-heavy fuels such as diesel. That will all happen, I think, as a result of economic forces and the global agreement. But there is a whole new area which will become increasingly important as time goes by, which is how do we get some of the gas out of the air, do that at a profit, or at least do it in a way that is cost-effective.
According to Flannery, business, social and environmental sustainability is the only way forward in the 21st century. I'm Leanne Gerari in Brisbane, and you're watching Business PNG.
There's a continuing debate in PNG, as there should be, about the best way of ensuring that both the government and landowners maximise the returns from Papua New Guinea's resources, which are, of course, not inexhaustible. Once they're gone, they are gone. It's a delicate balance, is it not? You referred in your speech to the lessons learned from the first LNG project. Do you foreshadow any changes to the way the new gas agreement might reflect that experience? And also, moving forward, that there's been some proposed changes, for example, to the Mining Act, also to maybe redress some of the balance. So does PNG have the balance right, or does it need to do more to make it more in favour of the nation and of landowners?
Thank you, Andrew. Just on the issue about the discussions taking place with the new projects that are coming on stream, particularly the expansion of the current LNG and of course, the second Papua LNG. Let me say this, it's probably not right for me to preempt what our negotiation team is going to discussing with the developers. But I want to say that the first LNG was a unique project. It was our foundation project, so we gave a lot of concessions that are not normally given to such a project. And of course, that was developed at the back of the global financial crisis period where we needed to raise a substantial amount of money to develop that project. The success of it is quite good, but the other side of the story is that many of the other stakeholders, state and the landowners, and especially those who in the project areas, you can see the demands that they are placing today. Issues like social mapping, the landowner identification, all these things were largely not done properly before the agreements were signed. These are mistakes that we don't want to make. The last thing we want to do is to change the fiscal regime of any of these projects, where it's going to disadvantage not only the developers but ourselves. This market is very competitive, and we've been speaking a lot to the industry experts. We've traveled the world, we've seen and discussed LNG issues with many of the leading LNG producing countries. We've tried to learn from the experiences they've gone through. We will structure an agreement that is fair to all stakeholders. But the transparency and visibility of flow of benefits to the landowners particularly must be very clear. That's the regime that we want to clearly establish. We can see the difficulties that we are facing today because of some of the shortcomings of the previous agreements, but that is a good learning experience. So I can assure the business community that we will do everything possible to make sure that the fiscal regime is stable. And I've always stated that the even proposed changes to the Mining Act, I will be encouraging vibrant discussions between the mining community and government. And because government represents the people, there are propositions that are coming there which reflect some of their thinking. But it doesn't mean that that is the position that we will finally conclude. We will have to negotiate an outcome that is beneficial to everyone.
You mentioned in your speech the importance of diversifying Papua New Guinea's economy, and you indicated some of the investments that are being made in other sectors to try and lift them up, if you like, so that PNG is less reliant in future on the mining and petroleum sectors, which inevitably have their boom and bust cycles. Outside of the mining and petroleum sectors, which sectors do you see as the engine room for Papua New Guinea's growth in the future?
Well, we've clearly outlined to the nation that we are focusing on agriculture, tourism, small to medium enterprises, getting our people skilled up, which is making sure that they're educated properly, skills-based training in technical colleges, building capacities at universities. These are programs that are now well established, and it's been starting to be delivered. In terms of agriculture development in our country, it's always been about availability of land. And we want to ensure that the rights of the landowners are protected, but the land is made available for investors to invest, and the investors' interests are also protected by a proper titling and proper leasing arrangements of those land that's been developed. So we've been partnering a few of the large investors who are starting to come into the country. There's huge interest in cattle, there's huge interest in sugar, huge interest in rice. These are areas where government is not trying to come in and participate to dominate the industries, but we are trying to provide security for the investor that government is involved with the landowners and with the provincial governments. The model that we have been we're developing is starting to work. Very much accepted in some very difficult areas. I'll give you an example. With the Israelis, we've got a poultry farm in a place called Koroba in the Yala province, and it's not an easy place to do business, I can guarantee you that. But the Israelis have done it, and it's very successful. And the people who benefit the most are the mothers who go every morning to the gate to get the eggs, or the chickens that they sell to the local markets, and the children who have access to protein, and that's a huge success. These are models that we want to create. And when those businesses are well established in the communities, government will divest itself out of those investments, and will move into another project. So government has been deliberately putting equity funding aside in our budget to making sure that we invest in agriculture and tourism. With the new tourism plan that we've got, we will be doing the same. Like in Kokopo, we want to build up to at least 2,000 beds hotels in Kokopo, and government will partner, or the landowners or the provincial governments or some of the funds who are now investing elsewhere in the Pacific. We are encouraging them to invest in our country. We give them really good incentives to invest in our country. And even direct flights from Brisbane or Sydney to places like Kokopo, Narita to Kokopo, from Shanghai to Kokopo, you will see quite a steady stream of long-term tourists coming into the country. This model has been successful elsewhere, and I don't see any reason why it cannot be successful in PNG. I always tell my colleagues in cabinet, I think, PNG, like Kokopo has got more to offer than Fiji. In Fiji you go, you get the bed, you get the beach, and you have the bar. But in PNG, you've got quite a variety, including culture and, your unique, diverse environment and the beaches and the caves. And if you want, you can have a volcano too, So, so these are areas that we are investing in. And of course, some of the successes we have had in the construction industry, we are trying to encourage home ownership by Papua New Guineans. Government has already invested close to 400 million kina with the BSP. Encouraging BSP, we put in deposits in BSP at 0 rate, encouraging BSP to lend at 4% for over 40 years, and that's been a great success. And I think many emerging middle-class Papua New Guineans are buying their own homes, and the families are looked after, and there's a new enthusiasm in that industry as well. So these are areas that the government wants to do more.
I'm Leanne Durari in Port Moresby, and you're watching Business PNG.
Thank you. You mentioned APEC, and it is a very exciting year for Papua New Guinea, and there's certainly a buzz around the country as people come and go from overseas and see Papua New Guinea for the first time, many of them. Next year, of course, Chile will host APEC, and the carnival will move on to another town. But to your mind, from what you've seen so far of the activity around APEC, what do you see as the lasting dividend, the lasting benefits to Papua New Guinea of hosting this extraordinary event?
Well, most important thing is not necessarily about the leaders coming into the meeting. They certainly come to endorse the discussions that has taken place by officials and our business community at the leaders' final meeting to endorse that. It is the policies that have been developed in these meetings which liberalize trade between our countries. Despite the rhetorics that's going on about protecting one's economy and things, the global trade will continue to develop and adjust. That is why it is important for Papua New Guinea to participate in these kind of meetings where, for instance, the focus for us is trying to engage with the CEOs Summit, where you will see all the representatives from the leading banks and financial institutions will be there. All the big investment funds will be there. And this is a great opportunity to showcase Papua New Guinea as a destination for investment. As you correctly said, many of them will be coming to Papua New Guinea for the first time. They've never heard of the country, some of them. As I've always said, they think that we're in Africa somewhere. But we are a large economy, an emerging economy in the Pacific. If you look at our GDP over the last 6-7 years, we've almost doubled our GDP in that time. And I have absolutely no doubt that over the next 10 years, we will double it again. And I don't think many countries around the world will achieve that. The challenge for Papua New Guinea is trying to make sure that our people migrate from where they are to middle class and beyond that, so that they have got the right skills, right opportunities, so they have a better standard of living. That's a challenge for us. And we can only do that by investing in education. And that is one of our top priorities of government over the last 7 years.
On a personal level, perhaps unusually for a politician, you come from a business background before you entered politics. And I'm wondering what lessons you learned from your time in business and your experience in business, and how has that informed your government's policies since you came into politics and into power, and what do you feel still needs to be done to foster business development? You mentioned, for example, the SME work that you've been doing in government.
Well, coming from a business background and going into government is a huge shock. Yeah, I can guarantee you that. The way they do business in government is not the one that none of us in this room will aspire to. But we've tried to change that mentality. Well, I've been in Parliament now. This will be my 20th term year in Parliament, but it has given me opportunity now over the last 7 years to try and get our bureaucracy to rethink the way they do business, and reducing red tape and making sure that things are attended in a timely manner. But more importantly, it's about the experience of business living within your means. And governments tend to live beyond their means, and that has always been the issue about managing government resources. So I think, as I said, if we, at the back of a very depressed and challenging times, we've been able to double the size of our economy, and we are continuing to maintain growth. I think the future of Papua New Guinea is very bright. We have to maintain stability in policy, stability in politics, make sure there's no social issues that will get out of hand, and that's a challenge for any government, whoever it is going to manage the country.
Sir, thank you so much for answering my questions and for your speech earlier today. Will you please thank the Prime Minister?
And that's all we have for this episode of Business PNG. For more information, or if you'd simply like to view this episode again, visit MTV online at the URL at the bottom of your screen. Or to simply join the conversation, like our page on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at the Twitter handle at Business PNG. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Leanne Jarari, and this was Business PNG.